Everybody has the Maya open? Okay. Today, what we're going to do, some of you know 3D, we're going to go a bit over the interface, what it does. It looks very scary. Now, your screen might look a bit different than mine, but this is the main open. Now, this looks like a lot of information, looks very confusing. We're going to go step by step. We don't need all this thing. So you don't need to, I'll show you today, we'll work with two tools, and I think actually we can start modeling and creating a lot. A very nice way to look at it is like this. You just erase the screen. But let's go a bit of it over this interface. Okay, so we have our one thing to notice, and I will send this on an email, but also write notes because I will drop in different shortcuts or keys that you should remember. It'll slowly become more and more feasible. Like in any program, we have here our file selections. This modeling, when I see here, this changes my menus all the time. But the first 7 menus stay the same. And I'll just show for an example. I have different segments because the program has so many details in it and so many different functionalities. They basically arrange it that you can change. If you're modeling, you're working on one way. So let's say, for example, now in modeling, we see our menus are File, Edit, Create, Select, Modify, Display, Windows. All this will always stay the same. From here on, Mesh, Edit Mesh, Mesh Tools, Mesh Display will change every time I change. So when I went to rigging, it changed. Now I have skeleton, skin. I'm not going to even yet explain what those are. We will get into them. Rigging is actually building for animation, setting it up, character, or so forth. Animation, again, this changed. For now, FX, which is more dynamics, we will do some tricks with this, rendering. So all the time this top menu changes. But we're staying on modeling, and also here Maya Classic, just make sure you have these two settings for your workspace. Now also I put on, and I will put this on the website, I have here, it's from the Autodesk website, there is the whole UI description that we will go through today. I will send this out. It's this one, which breaks down the program into its segments. But we will see. We don't need to cover everything. It's just that we will learn them as we go. A lot of things here some of them are not used or are used for specific objects. As we go, these here, all these are, it's called shelves. Shelves are just to imagine, we have different tools, polygons. I will repeat and explain them, so I'm running fast. But these shelves are where you can dock and put your different tools to have shortcuts that you can start going through. We can also create a custom shelf, which we will put the tools that we use all the time. You never in one job use all those tools at one time. A lot of times if we are modeling a castle, for example, I would tell you there's a set of tools that you need to use, and then we will create an empty new shelf and put those tools here. Just to go a bit more, file is the usual open scene, save scene, export, import, rough. We will go through everything, but just as a general overview. Edit, cut, copy, paste, delete, there's duplicate functions. It's like editing a mesh. Create is an important one when we are things. Now, when we'll create objects, we'll move into that. One thing with all those menus, if you notice, I have this little bar with a dotted line. This means I can tear them off. If I click here, I can pull this out. Usually you will have a few screens. I can't really throw it, or 2 screens to work, or a wide screen, so it's very comfortable to tear out a menu that you're working with and working like that. In this case, a bit more difficult. This part here is about snapping and selections, which we'll get into. This part here is the rendering, and here we go into our tool shelves. Shelves is this area. Our work area is this window here. So every window here is built in a stage with its own functionality. On the left side down here, we will have our tools. And these tools are, to remember all the time, QWERTY. And it's a good word. If you look at your keyboard, you have QWERTY, QWERTY. This is the shortcuts for all the move, translate, which we'll get into once we're done with the thing. So just try to remember that ahead. I will write it in a doc file. Below, I don't know if you have it, you probably do. Here is different layouts, which I don't really have. I need to see it on the screen like yours. You have it the same. Yeah, yeah, you have it. Your mine doesn't have much space, so if you look here, if I click this, you see I'm splitting it into. I will try to see how I can do it here. I need more space. No. Okay, on your computers, you should see below this sign a few layouts, and this is just how our workspace is split. If it's into 4 windows, 2 windows, different types of layout. Here we have our timeline, which is for animation. Film goes through a timeline. It's the same as video editing, where you have from 1 to 10 seconds, or this is where it goes through. This is our time range, which if you see, if I increase, I get a longer timeline. What I mean by this, usually when you work on film, it means 24 frames per second. When you work on European standards, it's PAL, which is 25 frames per second. You work on American system, it's 29. Games are played today at 60 frames per second. What frames per second means is that when I will render an animation, in 1 second I will have 25 images. Let's say if I'm working the European system. If I'm working on games, you can get up to 60. Basically, the quality gets better of movement and details. Usually I would leave this on default 24 for the film industry. Now when we look on this side, so these are our workspace, which we're not touching yet, where we have a menu about how to view things, what panels we see. On the side here, we have a channel box, which here I get all my initial details. We will have to create a model to see more in there. And here we have our layers. If you work with Photoshop, you have hide layers, display layers, in a sense, to see your objects. This one is actually quite important. This is your helpline. It actually, wherever I would look around, you see if I click this, it says perspective view. If I click on this, it says select tool, lasso tool. I get here on this line a feedback all the time of what it is. So you can actually go through the menu and see what each thing does and get your instructions here. This also helps you with, it'll tell you instructions when you're doing some specific action. It will tell you down here what to do next. Things like that. This is now our timeline player. Play, pause, back and forward. This section is more specific for characters or animations. And bottom here, quite important, this is our, if somebody works with coding, you get everything in Maya is actually scripted. So basically you could copy and change this whole program. Upside down, change your menus, how they look like, copy. Every action that I do is getting written here in code. As a user, I'm not a coder, I don't write code, you barely need to use code for 3D, although you have specific people which are writing scripts to speed up things. We will get, when you get more advanced with 3D, you do write expressions. We won't touch that so much in this workshop, but so you have, Maya has its own native language Mel, which you can write code with, and Python. Anybody here ever messed with coding? Or for us, less relevant. I'm just trying to show what it is. Although this line will give us our errors or what we are starting to do. Okay. Just to explain what modeling, I would just set your menu on modeling and go up into polygons to have this shelf on. Sometimes you can also hide these shelves because you don't need them and just work from here. It's just for the easier for the start. Let's start by going on the create and create for now polygon primitives. And the primitives are basic shapes like a sphere, a cube, a cylinder that we can start modeling pretty much everything from them. There are different ways of modeling. We will show this when we get more, but let's just start with a simple polygon primitives, a cube. When I click this, you see I have a cube appear in the center of my workspace. Also, my channel box on this side has all the data, so I know where it is on the x-axis, y-axis. If you notice here, I have the axis to indicate. Y means up and down, X is usually the horizontal, and Z is usually the depth. In different software, it's a different way around. So I don't know if 3D Max works the same way as Maya. You have different softwares. Blender works with a different type in Maya, but you always have an indication. If I will navigate through this workspace, I will see this change as well. About the navigation, so we created this cube. Now it's highlighted. Everybody has it highlighted. Let's press F and it zooms us into it. So remember the key, the shortcut F. A good thing, I'm going to run through a lot of things. Have a notebook, write some things down, because I will add more things than I will write later if you would like. So F just zooms to any object that is selected. If we see here, I have all the attributes. I can click here and change a number and write 90. Nothing will happen because I'm rotating on the same. Let's do it another way. Scale X 2. So I scaled it up to 2. No, I never work with the numbers, and I'll show you soon how, but let's start first with just the initial navigation. If I press the Alt and the left mouse, you see I'm orbiting around my object. I can rotate and orbit around it. So let's just try to get a bit handy with that. Alt and middle mouse means the dolly to the side. Again, I have a bad mouse, so for me it's a bit of a problem. Alt and middle mouse. Just take my word for it. Here, this is a dolly. So just the general navigation, which I'll put. Alt and left mouse is orbit. Alt middle mouse is side. I can also roll my roller to zoom in, zoom out, or Alt and right mouse is also zoom in and out. So let's just a bit get handy with that. We will repeat this so many times that it will become hopefully natural. And then every time I lose this, I will press F to zoom this in. Now what we are now inside, we created a cube and we're in object mode. Now what this means, this is an object made actually of a few components. And the difference is like this. If I will go now and press, I can right mouse on top of this cube and I will get a different menu options. Let's just try this here where I can see it. Object mode means this is our usual way to work with this. And remember the QWERTY that I started saying before. Let's try to cube, nothing actually changes. It's the same. If I press W, I get these arrows. So this is my transform tool. This is if I want to move this around. And you see I'm dragging on the arrows top to move it to a certain place. And E, the next one is rotate. And you see I have a sphere and I need to pick one by one the sphere to rotate my objects. If it's not working for somebody, just shout out. R is scale. So now I can scale this up. And notice if I scale from the middle on the gray one, it scales proportionally to all directions. If I pull one, and these are the same color as my in the indicator here of my axis. Y again is the up and down, X is sideways, and I can always see that. Now let's say my object got a bit messed up here. I'm not happy with how I rotated. I can always go here into my channel box and just punch in 0 to zero it out to where it was initially. So I'm taking all the rotations back and all the scaling. Oops, I need to put some scaling, of course. So I'm back to how I started. We have an object actually in 3D space. These lines that we see here are a grid. It's a visual interface, so we see where the floor is. We don't have to always have it. It depends how you prefer. I will repeat this, but I can just take this grid out, and now it's gone. Show and grid back. But let's leave this. Let's move our cube above the surface, so it's sitting on this type of floor. Now notice if I do it here, it's kind of very hard for me to understand if I'm exact or I'm not precise, and now comes a bit more tricky. If I press space bar, I split my screen into 4 views. The 4 screens, when I clicked on this layout of 4 screens, what I get is the first one is the perspective where we worked in, and each one has its own menu, so I can change how it looks like inside each screen. With the Alt, I rotate, like I said before. But notice here, I cannot with the Alt rotate. It gives me this X. The reason is this is a top view, this is a front, and this is a side. Those are all orthographic views, basically meaning that it's a flattened view. There is no camera to it. So it's exactly as if you took a, without a lens, a top view of things, so there is no orbiting around. But the reason why this is good is exactly if I would want to be precise, I can come to this one. If I press spacebar, if I'm standing over the side view, for example, and I press spacebar, this becomes my main screen. So this way I can just jump back and forth between screens, and I can move this to align. We will show aligning tools in this in a... You can either use the spacebar as I did or use the shortcuts here on the side. I will try to teach you as much as possible with shortcuts. Now try to position that the cube is somewhere on the floor. Now the floor, I'm looking at this main grid line. I have two darker grid lines and I'm looking at its side view. When I will go back to my perspective, it should be sitting quite okay. I can also do this in perspective. It's just a bit to move it. Okay. Now, when we are just again with the QWERTY, if I'm now on R, the scaler, this is important. If I scale, let's all try to scale from the middle, not from the side, so it's all proportional. Now I still get a complete cube. So now, for example, with a scale tool, actually you can create quite crazy models with just these primitives and shaping them across. I know it sounds maybe not so feasible, but even if I start, let's say I start to scale it, this is not the way it will work. Just for a quick example, if I scaled it as if it's a wall of my house, yeah? Another shortcut, Ctrl-D, means duplicate. So I now have double this object, it's overlaid. And if I will rotate it, and usually I rotate a little bit, I see my rotate Y is 83 degrees, and I will take it 90 to be more exact. So I can, in this method, I can actually from one single cube start slowly to model a whole house. Although we're not going to do it this way, but yeah, just to show. So basically, I can duplicate this, I can go stand on top of this and do Ctrl-D and just move it along here and take this one, Ctrl-D and move it along here. So we made some kind of box again. Just for the idea that we can start using objects and duplicating and make. So you can pretty much duplicate the objects, move them around and build kind of like a Lego, build as much as you want with in this way. But there is another thing with this object, which all these objects are made out of components, out of parts. And I will just now, or should I give you 5 more minutes to get around with this? We don't worry so much about this cubes as a house, because it's just to start illustrating the points. If I saw now what we saw, we can manipulate our objects is mainly by scale or rotations, translations, etc. Now this thing that I see here where my middle is, this is called the pivot. The pivot is where if I rotate this object, this will become very important later on. You see it rotates around this center. There is a way to move this pivot and change it so it will rotate differently. For example, a door would, if I would build a door, a cube, the door would move from the hinge like this, yeah, not from here. So we will have to see this a bit more robust. Now, just to describe what this model is made from, if I'll press F, and we can just leave one cube or select one cube. Sorry that I'm destroying your 4 walls, but it's a. This object is actually made of. It's a polygon. A polygon means it's made out of a few components. Like I said, the first 3D or all 3D is actually points in space. If I click, right click, and if you see I have here object mode, which is where we are at, let's move to vertex. The color change, and you see I have this little points here. So right click vertex, for example, or another shortcut is F8. F8 switches you from the object mode to component mode. Now these components, just so we see what they are, before even we touch it, just to understand what they do, each polygon is made out of dots and the connections between them. So it's more in the concept. Now, a polygon is usually a triangle. It's a three dotted surface. Now, the best, maybe easiest way to explain this object are made out of points, which are the vertices, faces, which is like facade of a building, let's say, and if I will right-click and say face, I get this whole object as a face that I can manipulate. If I go into vertex, I get only one point, and notice what I can do. I can actually change the shape of my object, right? And the last component, and then I'll try not to kill you guys too much, is edges. Edges are the lines in between two points. So if I right-click and say edge, I can work and manipulate on a complete line. Now what this allows me to do is I can manipulate this object in many more ways than just scaling it. I can, let's say if I select this, and selection is just this arrow, it's the Q. Again, remember the Q. If I select this, now the same as other software, if I press Shift, select the next point, I have 2 points selected. So therefore I can now press W for my transform and move this up or down, for example. So I am back into a normal open scene with nothing there. I will create a cube now again, but I'm going to create it from the shelf. If I'm standing on the polygon, I will create this here. But just create it and don't touch it now, because what we're going to show in the, where we change the attributes here, if you roll this down a bit, you see I have a P cube shape, and then I should have inputs P cube. Okay, this I can do only when I create an object. And if I, let's say I look at it and I will have now, it says how many divisions I have. I can also mark here, and let's make it 10. And you see what I get. I get a lot of divisions inside. It'll look exactly the same. So I'll just duplicate to show the difference. And this one will have so I'm scrolling this all the way down to inputs polycube, and I'll put this as 1. Okay. So, but this you have to remember, you can only do it when you create the object. Once you start scaling it, it won't work. So this is about the divisions. Now, if you look, both cubes look exactly the same thing. Nothing different, just this one has a lot of divisions. This one doesn't have any divisions, just 1. Now, let's press on the keyboard on 2, and look what happened to my cube here and here. And if I press 3, 3. So it's the same cube, and now this one became a circle. 2 and 3. Just these are just previews. It's to show a point. If I press 1, it's back to being a cube. This is how we started. We are on display level, it's called. Yeah. So we have our different ways to display these objects. Yep. And what happens if I take the cube that I have no divisions on, and 3 is smooth display, 1 is the least smooth. So 1, 2, 3 means 1 is rough, 3 is smooth. So if I press 3, this turned into a ball. If I press 3 here, this turned into a beveled cube. If you look at the edges, they're all nice and smooth, but it still stayed a cube. The reason is because we had more divisions. We had a bigger mesh or net around this object. So, now, if you continue down the line, 4 is wireframe. Just these shortcuts to remember. So we have 1, 2, 3 is our display levels. 4 shows us wireframe. Wireframe is like this. It's just to show us where the points are, the grid. If I look around. Now, even if I press 1 and I go into smooth, I still see the wireframe, which is just the points, the shell of it. If I this is 4. 5 is shaded. Yeah, PET is shaded mode. Chest is shaded with material. We don't have materials yet, and Sedum is with lighting, which we'll go into there. But just to show you that in the keyboard, we have the QWERTY, which is important. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are important. Yeah. Just to keep that in mind, you will see when you're going if this comes across. So again, if I'm pressing 3, I'm getting this smooth, and then it's very important how many divisions I have. Usually for film, you work a lot with the smooth options. For mobile or gaming, the smoothing won't work. Let's say Unity, for example, does not understand if I will bring this model into Unity like this, it will come a square or it will become rough. It won't come smooth. So I would have to actually create a sphere. Oh. Let's say, look, we'll try it. I'll record it. We'll repeat this. So. Okay, there's another way to how we work now, which is mainly if we'll do this, we will basically pretty much be able to model anything we wanted. Let's take our cube and flatten it down a bit. Okay. And let's lift it up a bit in the air. And I will press scale, which is R, and scale it from the center to have a bit of a bigger. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go, and I'll do it this way. I'll take this cube and I will change its shape. If I go in the channel editor all the way to the down to the inputs, and I will say subdivisions on the height, on the width 10, subdivisions on the depth 10. So I created something of this sort. Yeah. Here you see I have channel layer editor, and then here I have modeling toolkit. Let's press this. Okay, so everybody open the modeling toolkit. It's on the side here on the right. This is basically a window with all our tools to work on those objects. We will just work with, and you see you have the component modes and this. Let's ignore everything and just scroll down. And only the thing that's interesting for us is this extrude option for now. Before we do that, so I'm just have this window open, have extrude, I will show what it does exactly. But if I will now press on the object, right click, go into faces. Okay, so I have faces. So once we have our faces, you also have the faces like this. Okay, let's turn our model a bit. So we look at it from below and select the first edge face here. With shift, select this face, shift this face, and shift this. So 4 faces are selected together. Shift is to, you click one, shift the next one, this. Let's say if I want to get rid of one, just another tip to know, control, and it deselects this one. And if I do shift again, I can select it. Shift again also will work. Okay. So once I have 4 faces selected, I will just want to show, let's turn it like this. If I press the extrude, now a lot of times you will work only with this toolbox, the modeling toolkit. You have everything from selecting faces, vertices, all the stuff I showed now with the other ways. You have it there. Let's go to component and extrude. When I press extrude, nothing happened, although a lot happened. I get this window pop, and I get these arrows now on my object. Now if I will take this arrow and pull it down, so try pulling it down with me, as you can see I am pulling out this whole face as an object. So now I'm creating what I would hope for is a table. Okay? So we got a table. Just to notice something here, when I pull this extrude, I have this option, keep faces together on and off. Let's try, just for the example, I can also try just to show it to you because we will undo this. If I select now, let's say, I'll select a few faces together. I selected this whole group. If I will do extrude now and pull this up, they're one object that moves together. But if I will undo this and I will say keep faces off, what I get actually, maybe hard to see it, and we'll see it like this, is you see they're separated. So this is what it means. The other way around, it created me one object, as if I pulled it. This way is a few. Just if you'll get confused with it, I'm going to Control Z and undo this to have the back. Instead of F8, I will click here. I'm going back. So this is object mode, vertices, edges, faces, and UV selection, which we're not touching at the moment. Okay. So you can click always here, and here I go into vertices. It's the same as what I showed you with right-clicking on this bar. You have this here. A lot of times I work with just the screen like this, so I like to pull off the menus, but this is just whatever you prefer. So you can have everything down here. Let's say I'm happy with my table, but I want to adjust it now, and I want to actually make this plate a bit thinner, which is a bit... I will just go into my vertices, and I will go into a side view. And let's make this larger. So now I can marquee select. I can select all with a left click, mouse down. I select with a marquee all these top vertices. The same, and then I can just push them in, for example, to make my table thinner. So you have a lot of control afterwards to adjust your table or your model with this. Now I could do the same thing again, recreate this whole table, or I can just select this table, Control D, and move it out of the way. So I have now two tables, or chairs. I will also shrink it in the center. And you see, if I'm always jumping around between the views to see the thing that it goes. I will now zoom into the small chair that I created, or whatever it is. And I will go clicking here into face mode, and I'm going to select this face with shift, select this face. Okay. So I have two of the edges selected. And again, I will just do extrude. I'm rotating so I can see it better, and I'll pull it a little bit up, not all the way to the top. I will do another extrude, the same thing. I didn't touch anything, it's the same selection. And I will pull it just a tiny bit more. So if you zoom in to see, I did one extrude like this, another one, and a third one, which is the last, I hope, is like this. Now we'll need another one. All right. So 1, 2, 3, and another. So I'm not actually checking any of my selections, so it's 4 times. For example, if I'm not happy with how I positioned my divisions, I can always go in vertices mode, select a group, let's say, and I'm shift selecting them. And I move this up or down, and I can just move it along where I would like to have it. You don't have to be exact with this just to get the things. The idea here is that now we're going to close this chair to both sides. So I'm going to now go back into my face, and then I'll come and check around if we all have it. I'm going to select this face, and also from these two sides. So I have 4 faces selected, and I will again, the same tool that we used all the time now, extrude. And I'll pull it out, you see they're pulling. I will not merge them, although in principle you should, but for now we won't. Running a bit this, I'm going to show one more trick that we are not just for fun. Otherwise, I would like you guys for next time to just start with the same system, save this scene, try to add more chairs or a bit in the same, and run into problems. Don't be afraid if suddenly the scene crashed or something, it doesn't work, and then ask this. By next week, we will already have an online forum, so sometimes you suddenly won't be able to select your object. You don't know why, just a quick question. I think I will be able to solve it. For fun of it, just to show, and this is not something that I'm teaching now, just to a bit to show the power of this software. If, let's say, I wanted to make a tablecloth now for this object, I'm showing now something with dynamics. We're not going to learn it so much. It's just a little bonus thing, in a sense, to show. I will create a polygon plane. If somebody wants to play around with dynamics, I mean, we're not going to really teach it in this course at this stage. Just thought it would be a nice... So I created a plane. A plane is basically a cube with divisions. I will move this up. I will scale it. If somebody wants to follow it, it's great. it's a very quick trick, but the cloth will get complicated, so I will just add a few divisions here. Okay. I'm not putting this as an exercise into FX. I will have here and cloth. I will start by selecting this. Let's extend that time. And notice what will happen now. With a very quick setup. You see what I got? I did basically a very basic simulation of, I'll show this again. Okay, so I'm draping this cloth on top of the thing. Look how fast it's running, and it's okay. This will eventually fall off my, let's put this on 500. I'm not teaching this yet, although we will add those things as we go, because Maya is very powerful. This tool is actually made for animations and simulations, although I use it a lot also in modeling. What I could do is now say stop, edit, delete all by type history, and that's it. And I have now a mesh that is modeled this way. The point of showing this was to show that there's a lot more ways to model than just by breaking things. There is a lot of simulations that can help us in modeling. There's deformers, we'll get into them later stage. If you wanted to try this out, do as much as possible. But what I want you to try till next time, and you all have computers at home where you can come here, try to model a bit more robust scene just with those tools. Whoever can do more is great, whoever less. Now the idea here is that you'll run into problems, that the program won't work, and then we can go and see why those problems happen, because sometimes it will go. Now if I want to save this scene, I'm happy with my start, for example, and I want to save it so I can continue working on this later. I go to File, Save Scene As, and usually it should go, and this is actually quite important. Where does it go in your computer? To do File, Save Scene As?
The same documents.
Maya projects. Okay, for now we will all leave it like this on the default, but we're going to set up a system. Actually, Maya, it gets very robust, and to name objects and everything needs to be quite organized, because projects get very messy, and usually a project, it's also a good habit to learn to work, because obviously you will work with other people. If you have your own system and you save files here and there, at the end there has to be a pipeline, a system, so another person can come, modeler, continue your work, or models can be pulled in for an engine, a programmer can take it, and there are systems for this, and that is called the project structure, which we will go through when we'll open more robust projects. For now, I'm just going to save it in my documents, Maya projects default scenes, and I'm going to call this table MDL, save as. It says student version, continue. Like, wow. So look, try. It's the first time we're having this this workshop. So don't, if you have time, we'll repeat this, a lot of things here a lot, and we will build on this. But try really to take some time to work and model. What I was hoping for is like let's say a table, some chairs around, more robust. Now you also have the spheres to create more oval shapes and create polygon sphere. For example, I would like to create a bowl from this. I can always go in my modeling toolkit, faces, I will select with shift half of the sphere and delete it. So I have a, I don't know, salad bowl or whatever. Yeah. So you can also, by just cutting objects and slicing them, deleting parts, create this. The same with the extrude. So the only tools you need to do is the components and the extrudes. And the same is after I cut this, and if I will go to my modeling toolkit and say extrude, I will be able to give this thickness, for example. So I just took a sphere, I cut it in half, and I extruded the faces.